Toby is the guy who got Rob into jiu-jitsu. So, dude, Toby, welcome, man. You're a special guest for Fight Commentary Breakdowns.
Thanks, man. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to chat with you.
And, okay, tell me about your martial arts journey.
I grew up in Torrance, so sort of at the epicenter of a lot of kind of where jiu-jitsu landed in America. But as a kid, I just, had a ton of energy. And I think like a lot of moms, my mom put me in karate. And I transitioned from karate into Kungfu. I actually got my red sash in Kungfu. Getting to there required some Tai Chi as well. So I had a lot of familiarity there. I grew up in my household with like a Hawaiian uncle that ended up telling me to kind of transition into, it's like a Hawaiian freestyle fighting. Some people call it ku or Kalimalama. And so I did, that as a teenager. And then at the time I had thought, maybe to get into some version of law enforcement, and ended up finding out that a lot of those guys train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So at 17 with, my red sash in Kung Fu, my training in the other martial arts that I had, I ended up joining South Bay Jiu-Jitsu with Bob Bass, who's one of the Dirty Dozen, just a legend. So Bob, if you ever see this, buddy, love you. And that was such a cool gym at the time. And we had, Chris Howder coming out to teach a bunch, Rick Williams, obviously Bob's brother Joey, Dave Meyer. I mean, we had some legit, dudes coming through that gym. And then, Nick Curson, who runs Speed of Sport. So really, really, really great guys. I ended up leaving Bob's gym to join Higgins directly. So I was at Rigan Machado's for a while. And then I moved for work out of the South Bay area into the San Fernando Valley area. And I asked my buddy Ryan Gregg, who ran on the mat for a while with Scotty. And I was like, hey, man, I'm moving to this area. Do you have any gym recommendations? And he was like, Chris Lisciandro, don't even take a trial class. Show up with your checkbook. Just sign up. Chris is the best. And Chris got his black from Hanato, who's also a Machado guy. So I joined Chris's gym in 2007, 8, something like that. So and Chris gave me my black belt. So that's what I've been with for, 12-ish years.
How was the transition going from Kung Fu to BJJ? Did you felt like the Kung Fu helped you, hindered you? Maybe it was a little bit of both, helped you in some things, hindered you in other things?
I don't, man. I thought that Kung Fu was really good, maybe for my like soul and my energy. But as far as preparing me for other martial arts, the grappling stuff's really, really basic. At least, what I was kind of doing, certainly compared to jiu-jitsu, like Kung Fu karate, like you maybe learn some real basic arm bars and some of those sorts of, light joint manipulations or some wrist locky type stuff that can, maybe you can borrow from that a little bit. But, I honestly, a couple months into jiu-jitsu, I felt safer than I, really had prior to that. And maybe it's just a mental thing, but it's also, you kind of pressure test a lot more in jiu-jitsu. Like I know my such and such works because I did it against a resisting opponent that was actively trying not to have it happen, right? Mm-hmm. It's a little less choreographed. So it kind of gives you that confidence that, it's real deal.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about the day you got your black belt. How did that feel in jiu-jitsu? You got your black belt in jiu-jitsu. How'd that feel?
Yeah, that was a really cool moment for me. It was kind of random. It was just, we were training and, coach just kind of sort of walked up and pulled it out of his gi and was like, this is long overdue sort of a thing. I was like, no way, come on. Like it felt a little surreal. Every jiu-jitsu guy I've ever met at every promotion he or she's ever got always says like, oh man, I didn't deserve that, or I didn't feel ready, or I this and that. So that was kind of the case for me, especially because, you kind of build up in your head sort of who and what a black belt is. And it's kind of weird to map that onto yourself. But, I had been training, 14, 15 years, something like that at the time. Obviously a little on and off, but you put the mat time in, and we have great training partners, and I have all the trust in the world of my coach. So when he says you're at that rank, you're at that rank. So it was really, really cool. It was really, really special. I did a fairly lengthy post about it, but what I was basically encapsulating in that post was that it's a really special accomplishment, because it's one of those things that it doesn't care who your dad was. It doesn't care what your background, your money, you're this, or you're that. It's jiu-jitsu is a really fair sport. When you give to it, it gives back to you. And every day you're training with someone, you really have to look yourself in the mirror, because if they're more prepared or better fit or any of those sorts of things, then they're going to choke you out. And so it's kind of something you earn.
So here's the question then. Do you teach too now? You have your black belt, right? Do you teach?
Yeah, I have taught on and off fairly regularly throughout my jiu-jitsu journey, including obviously how I met Rob. I was, one of the guys that taught him back in the day. I'm not currently an active instructor at all. Very, very rarely from time to time, I might pinch in and, I don't run the warm up or show something here and there, but we've got, real great coaches at Street Sports, and those guys, they're tremendous, and we're in way better hands.
So let's talk about then how you met Rob. So you were his first teacher, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we met at LMU, Loyola Marymount University. I went to play soccer there, so that's sort of how I chose that school. At the time, I was a blue belt, but it was 2003, 2004, something like that. So being a blue belt was pretty rare, and certainly more than enough. So I got to LMU, and they have the ability to not only have kind of your NCAA sports like soccer, basketball, et cetera, but you can have club sports, and a lot of schools have like a rugby club or whatever. So I got there and I was like, man, it'd be cool to start a jiu-jitsu club. For whatever reason, some of the like Hawaiian Culture Club guys and I either had a class or something, and those Hawaiians, they're always down to scrap. So they were, a couple of those guys were like, yeah, for sure. I would join for sure. So I had a little bit of, momentum and some guys I thought would join. So I launched a club sport at LMU in club jiu-jitsu. Pretty quickly, I hooked up with Andrew Hagar, who's an excellent, not only martial artist, but specifically striker, Muay Thai guy, and striking coach. So he was like, dude, this is pretty badass. You run the grappling and I'll run the striking. So we kind of had an MMA club pretty quick and early. And somehow or another, Rob found us, or we found Rob, and he kind of wandered in and was like, hey, this is a cool sport. I'm into the, whole UFC thing. And, are you guys legit? And obviously he rolled with us, or, held pads with Hagar, and was kind of like, yeah, this is some good stuff.
How quickly did the club grow? Was it like 20 students, 50 students, 100 students?
Yeah, we had like 80 something members. It was, the biggest club sport on campus. We printed up shirts that said LMU MMA club on the chest, and on the back it said, my club will beat up your frat. And
that's awesome, bro.
Yeah, so a bunch of the guys are walking around wearing that. And I think it gained a little bit of traction, because most of the dudes could really back it up, and most of the guys that were being possibly a little offended by the shirt really didn't want to say anything about it. So some of those guys kind of joined up, and we ended up, being bouncers for some of the frat parties, because, most of the guys that were in the club weren't also frat guys. I was just a soccer guy, sports guy, so I had nothing against, fraternities or frat guys, but most of them weren't, which meant they could be fairly neutral about enforcing, if you guys had like a list of people you wanted in or not in, people you wanted us to throw out, keep the peace sort of thing. So it gained a little bit of traction, and it got some membership. I mean, LMU is a small school. We only had like 4,000 or 5,000 people. So to have, almost 100 in the club, I was pretty proud of.
I'm looking at pictures right now to see if I can find something of like Rob in the club, but I'm looking on his Facebook. I can't find anything. So
I'll dig something up and send it to you.
Why don't we, please send me some, but why don't we talk about that first day he walked in? Do you still remember?
I would love to say that the first day he walked in is a deep memory of mine that I'll never forget. But to be candid, I can't say I remember day one. I remember plenty of times with Rob, and really great times. And he even had like a little sort of knack for photography, and he would sometimes bring a really nice camera to like my birthday parties and stuff to get some shots for me. So I got, tons of great memories of Rob, but specifically his first day, I can't say I remember that.
A lot of the Rob that we see now was already there when he started training with you.
Yeah, he was a really like dedicated student, and he's a really cerebral guy in general, right? So he'd ask really good questions and try to figure out like the moves and stuff, and you could tell he was tinkering with it between classes because he would come back with kind of thoughts and feedback and stuff like that. So and he's just a super nice guy, super respectful guy. So it really kind of like helps the class out. He was very regular as well, so having those kind of few guys that were super regular. Just super cool attitudes. I also think probably contributed to some of the growth of the club because it was not really intimidating. You had a bunch of white belts that were super nice guys. Like no one's there to kick anyone's ass.
Yeah. Tell me about your teaching style. How do you teach BJJ? Like, do you have your own curriculum, or what was it like being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teacher at LMU?
Yeah, I do. And even, I've ran some kind of instructionals out of my house. I got a whole downstairs basement that's all matted, like a full-on combat room. So I've taught out of the house for a while too. And yeah, I do have a curriculum. I have found that one aspect that's difficult for people to get started in jiu-jitsu is a lot of times they join a gym and the gym's kind of already got its train on the tracks, right? So these guys join at a random time, and their day one might be like a half guard sweep or something. It's just whatever the guys are teaching that day. And, it's certainly no fault of the academies because they have to attend to their students. And frankly, a lot more guys come in for day one and bounce than stick around. So you can't bend over backwards for day one guys. Yeah. But when I was running the club or running like instructionals out of my house, I would try to put together a multi-series, and frankly, I would often I like to start with self-defense stuff. So it's kind of jiu-jitsu, but it's really the stuff where it's like, look, if you're going to spend any time with me at all, like let's get at least a couple weeks together and let me get you out of a headlock or a guillotine or some of this basic stuff. Nice. Grip breaks, people, grabbing bear hug type stuff, the self-defense aspect of jiu-jitsu. Because a half guard sweep is less important than getting out of a headlock, right?
Yeah, exactly.
People that train with me for 2-3 months, and we never got to that stuff, and then they get their ass kicked on the street. So I would, start with the self-defense stuff, and then work, like around really basic stuff. So maybe like starting with, from guard, maybe like an armbar from guard, and then doing a sweep, and then like a simple scissor sweep, and then the next class. Now that we just did a simple sweep in the last class, you're mounted on the guy. So maybe we'll do, shoulder lock from mount or an armbar from mount or, something that kind of all feeds together so that, the person can kind of put these aspects that kind of interlink together and then find your way back into guard and maybe work on like a triangle and some of the kind of basic stuff because they already knew the armbar. And then, maybe next class, the armbar from triangle when you can't quite finish your triangle, right? So really kind of trying to make sure that the concepts and stuff I'm teaching are really adjacent and really touching so that they're not super disparate and kind of hard to make mental connections for people.
Wow, that's great. Like building on each other, also teaching some fundamental stuff. I really like that. So my next question is about throughout your BJJ journey, were you big on like competing and doing tournaments and stuff like that?
Yeah, I was. I was also, a lot of my early jiu-jitsu career, I was also on the soccer roster. So there's times of the year where I really couldn't compete. You could on the back end, but if you can't take an injury mid-season, especially when people are ostensibly paying you in tuition and things like that to play. But any times I could, and certainly over the summers, especially like growing up in the sport, like white belt, blue belt, et cetera, I think it's just such a great way to advance your learning like way quicker. So those lessons you learn from the tournament, you're never going to forget, right? Like I might have been taught a guillotine escape once or twice in class, but it wasn't until I did the tournament and got tapped to a guillotine that I was like, okay, what's the escape again? And I'm never forgetting, this will never happen to me again, right? So you want to learn that because now you're pissed off, right? You won a match or two and you were on your way to a medal and then you get caught in a guillotine. You're like, God damn it, So I think that there's a lot of learning lessons that come out of tournaments, and even just doing. If part of the reason you're doing jiu-jitsu is to keep you safer on the street, the step between your gym and a street fight really is a tournament, because you're going against someone that's ratcheting up the opposition, the energy, and you probably have a little nerves going, so you got to find a way to use your techniques under pressure. So I think they're super important.
For people who want to start training in jiu-jitsu, what advice do you give them to either find the right gym or not feel stuck or not get hurt, etc.?
One thing I often find when I'm talking to people is they kind of want to get in shape first or get themselves to some milestone first. And it's like, don't worry about that. Like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. Like, you just get in whatever condition you're in. Jiu-jitsu will help you get in shape. Jiu-jitsu will help you lose weight or tone up or build up your cardio or whatever. So the first thing I would tell people is, if you're even interested, just go into a gym, walk in and, get a sense of the vibe, get a sense of the guy that runs the gym, get a sense of some of the people that train. If you want to try out a couple of gyms, great. I would caution people to be maybe a little less concerned if it's a super big name black belt or something like that. Like, figure out the vibe of the gym more than, the name of the gym, I guess.
I think that's so important. So I decided before the lockdown, I wanted to learn a little bit of boxing. So I didn't go to the biggest, most famous boxing gyms. There were some of them very close to me, right? But instead, I just went to one that just felt right. And, it's a little place in Venice, but they just felt right. And I'm glad I did, because I got such great training there. Unfortunately, I can't go, and it's making me so sad. But, everyone was like, why don't you go to this place? Why don't you go to this place? There's this place right there. Conor McGregor went to this place sometimes. Why don't you go there? I'm like, because this place just feels right for me. And so it's really hard to do that, right? Because like you said, LA especially, but for viewers that are not watching LA, a lot of big cities have a lot of great big name gyms, but sometimes they're just not the right fit for you. Like, I'm a weird dude. I'm a weird, sometimes introverted, sometimes fake extroverted dude who needs to see things like 6 times to understand. Like, I'm a weird dude. So like, I don't fit in at a lot of gyms, right? So like, I really need a place that really fits me. And I guess a lot of viewers, they go into martial arts because, they're not like they might like try to do it to prevent bullying. They might try to do it to raise their confidence for whatever. So you really need to find the right fit gym. And sometimes it is really not that most famous one, or the one that's in the news the most.
I totally agree. Like you said, we're in LA. There is no shortage of big name fellas teaching out here. And, I could go to any one of them if I really wanted to. And I drive past several gyms. This might be a little like local for people that aren't here, but I live in Westwood and I train in Sherman Oaks. I drive past multiple gyms to go to the one that I really like. And gyms have nothing against it. Some of them are more competition based, some of them are less, some of them are, they've got different vibes and frankly different students, right? It's different body types. So some gyms are like literally bigger, like physically you've got a lot of like heavyweight. I'm 6'2", anywhere from 230 to 250 depending upon the kind of season. So it's nice for me to get some good big strong guys to roll with too.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you, because you seem like a very athletic guy. You've played soccer, and now you say you're 6'2". So do you feel like that athleticism helped you with jiu-jitsu? Do you think it hurt sometimes? Where do you think athleticism stands? Because the reason I ask that is because jiu-jitsu oftentimes is marketed as like the way for the underdog, the way for the small guy to beat the big guy. But I will be the first one to put this out there. I think no matter how good your jiu-jitsu is, if there's some guy who's way more athletic than you, you're going to have a lot of hard time against him, no matter, if he's just a white belt.
Right. Yeah. First of all, when I first started jiu-jitsu, the first tournament I did was at 168. So I was still 6'2", but I was tall and skinny. And then, put on, more size over time. And it kind of, I almost feel like a little bit of like an Anthony Davis basketball analogy, where he was, smaller point guard type first and got really good handles and then grew into his size. Right. So I had this like crazy spider guard and stuff that I probably wouldn't have necessarily developed initially if I was, 75 pounds heavier when I first started. I would probably have a lot more top game wrestling, which I folded in later, but I still have some good fundamentals. of a different body type, and this is a long way of saying the answer to your question, regardless of your athleticism or your body type, there is a style of jiu-jitsu that you can benefit from and use to your advantage, right? So I mentioned Bob Bass earlier. Bob Bass is a short dude with short limbs and a rock iron neck, and it's like, good luck trying to find an armbar on him because he keeps slipping out and he's just driving his head into you. And it's like every different body type, if you kind of learn, Rigan Machado is one hand, you know what I mean? Like you can figure out a way to adapt to your game. And obviously at a certain point, more athleticism and or more size, all things being equal, are helpful, of course. But I think that in a world where a smaller, undersized guy and a bigger guy, both of which were untrained, the bigger guy for sure would have been able to kind of, headlock or win some version of a combat. The littler guy, can train himself up and start to close that delta, and at a certain point, take off. I don't think Marcelo Garcia could do 10 push-ups. He would kick the shit out of anyone I know.
Wow, that's awesome, man. And I bet you that your jiu-jitsu journey has helped you in like your day job too, right? Whatever you do.
My jiu-jitsu journey has helped me be like a better dentist patient. Like there's really applications to where you're just like, because the biggest thing is you really learn the difference between, are you in peril or are you just uncomfortable?
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where it's like, you're under some big, strong guy's side control or neon belly or something, and that sucks, and you want out. But fundamentally, you're just uncomfortable. So you start to learn, all right, discomfort is manageable, right? And then it translates to little stuff. Like, I have a pool that's not heated. I love wintertime, ice cold, somewhere in the 40s. I just get in there, dive in, because it's like, it's uncomfortable, and I want to seek out those areas of discomfort to continue to push myself. And that translates to making sales calls when you don't want to be rejected again, or, sending one more prospect email, and maybe that's the one that lands. Just all those versions of not being a quitter. It spreads to everything.
So from my understanding, and for viewers of Fight Commentary Breakdowns, I'm going to move this part of the talk to the other channel. So if you guys haven't subscribed to the other channel, make sure to subscribe, because this part of the talk is going to end here. So Toby, from my understanding, you work in insurance, right?
I do.
And how did you get into that?